Have you ever wondered what happens when everything you believe is tested in the space between life and death? Today, I'm sharing a story that medical science cannot explain, a testimony that crosses the boundary between impossible and miraculous. What you're about to read may challenge what you think you know about death and dying. Even though it is said that death is an exit from this world, mine was an opposite of that. Sit on and come with me on this journey as I share my personal story of how I cheated death by the help of a spirit. Please comment below where you're watching from so we can connect as a global family and continue to lift each other up in prayer. Your presence here matters, and together we stand stronger than we ever could alone. I work as a senior physician at a hospital in Upper Egypt. I was born in 1970 in Cairo to a Muslim family. My father was an imam at a local mosque, a man deeply respected in our community. My mother taught Quran to young girls in our neighborhood. I grew up memorizing verses, attending prayers 5 times daily, and believing with all my heart that I was walking the only true path. I became a doctor because I wanted to heal people. Medicine fascinated me, the way the human body worked, how it could break down and be restored. I studied hard, graduated near the top of my class, and by 2015, I had built a reputation as a skilled and compassionate physician. I was 45 years old, married to a wonderful woman, and we had a teenage daughter who was 15 at the time. Everything changed in early 2015 when I met a patient who would alter the course of my entire life. He was a Coptic Christian man who came to me with severe diabetes complications. Over the weeks of treating him, we developed a friendship that went beyond doctor and patient. This patient had something I couldn't quite understand, a peace that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than circumstances. One afternoon, as I was checking his blood sugar levels, my patient told me that his peace came from knowing Jesus personally. He explained that Jesus wasn't just a prophet to him, but God who came to earth, died for humanity's sins, and rose again. He told me that salvation wasn't earned through good works or religious rituals, but was a free gift received through faith. I argued with him, of course. I told him what I'd been taught all my life, that Jesus was merely a prophet, that the Bible had been corrupted, that Islam was the final and complete revelation. But my patient didn't argue back. He simply told me he would pray for me, that God would reveal truth to me if I honestly sought it. 4 months after this patient was discharged, I couldn't stop thinking about our conversations. I started reading the New Testament in secret, hiding it inside medical journals so no one would see. The words gripped me in ways I couldn't explain. I read about Jesus healing the sick, raising the dead, forgiving sins, and claiming to be the way, the truth, and the life. Something inside me was changing, like a seed slowly breaking through hard ground. By September 2015, I had made my decision. I believed Jesus was who he claimed to be. I prayed in secret, asking Jesus to forgive my sins and become my Lord. I felt something shift inside me that day, not an emotion exactly, but a deep knowing that I had found truth after years of searching. I kept my faith hidden for 3 months. I continued attending Friday prayers with my father, continued the outward rituals, but inside I was torn apart. I knew I couldn't live a lie forever, but I also knew what confession would cost me. The crisis came on December 18, 2015. My father confronted me after finding the New Testament hidden in my study. He demanded to know if I had become a Christian. I couldn't lie to him anymore. I told him yes, that I believed Jesus was the Son of God, that I had surrendered my life to him. The look on my father's face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't just anger, it was horror, betrayal, and grief all mixed together. He told me I had brought shame upon our entire family, that I had betrayed everything he had taught me, that I was now worse than an infidel. He gave me 1 week to recant or face the consequences. My mother cried for days. My wife begged me to think of our daughter, to consider what this would do to our child's future. She told me no one would marry a girl whose father had apostatized from Islam. She pleaded with me to just keep my new beliefs private, to not make a public declaration. But I couldn't. I had found truth, and I couldn't pretend otherwise. When the week passed and I hadn't recanted, my father went to the local imam and religious leaders. They called a meeting of community elders. I was summoned to the mosque on a Friday evening, December 25, 2015. About 40 men were there, including my father, uncles, and cousins. They began with questions, trying to understand how an educated man could fall into such deception. I explained what I believed as clearly and respectfully as I could. I told them I still loved them all, but that I had found truth in Jesus Christ and couldn't deny him. The room erupted. Men who had known me since childhood now looked at me like I was a stranger, a disease that needed to be cut out. The Imam declared me an apostate. He explained that according to Islamic law, I had 3 days to return to Islam or face death. He told me my marriage to my wife was dissolved, that I had no rights to my daughter, that I was effectively dead to my family and community. Those 3 days were torture of the soul. My wife took our daughter and moved back to her parents' house. My father wouldn't look at me. Patients began canceling appointments when word spread. I received threatening phone calls throughout the night. Men told me they knew where I lived, that they would make an example of me, that my blood would be halal, permissible to shed. On the third day, December 28, 2015, I went to the hospital for my shift. I had decided I wouldn't hide, wouldn't run. If God wanted to protect me, he would. If this was how my earthly life would end, I trusted that heaven awaited. It was around 2 in the afternoon when it happened. I was reviewing patient charts in my office when suddenly I felt a crushing pressure in my chest, like an elephant standing on my ribcage. Pain radiated down my left arm and up into my jaw. As a doctor, I knew immediately I was having a heart attack. I was only 45 years old, relatively healthy, but stress and fear had apparently pushed my body beyond its limits. I managed to press my emergency button before collapsing. My colleagues found me on the floor, unconscious, not breathing. They immediately started CPR and wheeled me to the emergency room. A Muslim colleague who had known me for years led the resuscitation team. They connected me to the defibrillator. My heart was in ventricular fibrillation, essentially quivering uselessly instead of pumping blood. They shocked me once. Nothing. Twice. Nothing. They continued CPR, pumping medications into my veins, but my heart wouldn't restart. 3 shocks. 4. 5. 6. My colleague later told me they gave me 14 shocks over the course of 70 minutes. 14 times they tried to restart my heart. After 70 minutes, my heart went into asystole, a flat line. No electrical activity at all. I was clinically dead. Medical science is clear about this. After 4 to 6 minutes without oxygen, the brain begins to die. After 20 minutes, brain death is usually irreversible. I had been without a pulse for over an hour. Even if they managed to restart my heart, everyone expected I would be brain dead, a vegetable on life support. My colleague made the decision that most doctors would make. He called the time of death. He announced to the medical team that I was gone, that they had done everything possible. Several staff members who knew me began to weep. Some of them knew about my conversion to Christianity, and they wondered if this was somehow God's judgment. But there was one nurse in that room, a Coptic Christian woman who had secretly befriended me after learning I had become a believer. While everyone else was preparing to disconnect the equipment and cover my body, this nurse knelt beside my bed. She didn't ask permission. She simply clasped her hands and began to pray. She prayed out loud in Arabic, asking Jesus to have mercy, to demonstrate his power, to show that he is the God who raises the dead. She reminded God of Lazarus, of the ruler's daughter, of the widow's son. She asked Jesus to glorify his name through my life. My colleague later admitted he was irritated by her praying. He told her she was being disrespectful, that I was dead, that she needed to accept reality. But this nurse kept praying. She placed her hand on my cold forehead and declared that Jesus is Lord, that nothing is impossible for him. And then it happened. The monitor that had shown a flat line for several minutes suddenly registered activity. One blip. Then another. Then a rhythm. My heart had started beating on its own. The room exploded into chaos. Nurses who had been cleaning up equipment suddenly rushed back. My colleague, stunned, immediately checked for a pulse. It was there, weak but present. He shouted orders to prepare medications, to get ready to intubate, to call the intensive care unit. But the miracles weren't finished. Over the next hour, my vital signs stabilized. My blood pressure rose. My oxygen levels improved. By evening, I was breathing on my own. They removed the breathing tube the next morning, and when I opened my eyes, the first thing I asked for was water. My colleague couldn't believe what he was seeing. He examined me thoroughly, expecting to find severe brain damage, memory loss, inability to speak coherently. But I was completely normal. I knew who I was, where I was, what had happened. I could recall medical information, recognize faces, and carry on complex conversations. He ordered brain scans, neurological tests, cognitive assessments. Everything came back normal. Not just normal, perfect. There was no brain damage whatsoever, despite being without oxygen for over 90 minutes. The medical staff whispered about it. Words spread through the hospital. Some called it impossible. Others called it a statistical anomaly. But the Christian nurse smiled and told anyone who would listen that Jesus had raised me from the dead, just as he promised he would do for those who believe in him. My recovery was equally miraculous. Within 3 days, I was walking. Within a week, I was discharged. Within 2 weeks, I was back at work. Doctors who examined me said they had never seen anything like it in their entire careers. But the story doesn't end with physical healing. My resurrection became a testimony that spread throughout the region. Muslims who had condemned me now struggled to explain what had happened. Some said it proved God wanted me alive to return to Islam. Others said it was just medical luck. But many, quietly and privately, began asking me questions about Jesus. My father came to visit me in the hospital 3 days after I woke up. He stood at the door, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. He told me he had heard about my death, had been preparing for my funeral, had been relieved in some dark way that the shame would be buried with me. But now I was alive, walking and talking normally. He asked me if I would return to Islam now that God had given me another chance. I told him gently but firmly that it was Jesus who gave me this chance, that the Christian nurse's prayer had been answered by the Christian God, and that I was more convinced than ever that Jesus is Lord. My father left without another word. We haven't spoken since. My wife came to see me once. She told me she was glad I was alive but that she couldn't remain married to an apostate. The divorce was finalized within months. My daughter was forbidden from contacting me. That pain cuts deeper than any physical death ever could. I lost my family, my reputation, my place in society. But I gained something infinitely more valuable. I gained the certainty that Jesus Christ is alive, that he answers prayer, that he holds the power over life and death, and that he loves me enough to raise me from the dead. Today, I continue to work as a doctor. I treat Muslims, Christians, and everyone else with the same compassion and skill. But I also share my testimony whenever someone asks why I believe. I tell them about dying and coming back, about the prayer that shouldn't have worked but did, about the God who proved himself faithful when I was willing to lose everything for him. Medical records confirm everything. The defibrillator logs show 14 shocks. The timestamps prove I was dead for over 90 minutes. The brain scans demonstrate impossible normalcy. The documented recovery defies medical explanation. I still face threats. I still live with the grief of losing my daughter. I still pray that one day my family will understand. But I have no regrets. Because I know that the Jesus I read about in that hidden New Testament is real, is powerful, and is worthy of everything I lost and everything I'll ever have. If he can raise someone from the dead after 90 minutes, he can do anything. And that truth is worth dying for. If you've read this testimony today, I want to ask you to pray for believers around the world who face persecution simply for following Jesus. Pray for those who lose families, jobs, and safety because they refuse to deny Christ. Pray that God would protect them, strengthen them, and use their suffering to draw others to salvation. If you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, today is your opportunity. Don't wait until you face death to make this decision. Pray with me now. Jesus, I recognize I am a sinner who needs saving. I believe you died on the cross for my sins and rose from the dead. I surrender my life to you today. Forgive me, change me, and give me courage to follow you no matter what it costs. Amen. Please share this story so others can know that Jesus still performs miracles today. Comment below where you're watching from. Like this testimony and subscribe so more people can hear stories that prove Jesus is alive and active in our world.